of the IATA AGM, when decorum goes out of the window, protocol is forgotten, and we actually get on with calling a spade a bloody shovel. And we have a fine panel upon which to do it. I'll introduce the panel to you in just one moment. Not that they need any introduction. But if we needed any reminder about why or how this industry is so topical, how every day what happens in the news is relevant to you, well, just look at the last 24 hours, eh? Do we have anybody, do we have any chief executive from one of the Gulf carriers with us? I wonder why. And in Washington, just in the last few hours, the commercialization of the air traffic control system is being announced. The ability of this industry to make news, to be the victim of news, to be the recipient of news, and to be at the whim of news is what we're going to talk about. Our panel, we have Rickard Gustafsson from SAS. You're most welcome. Oscar Munoz, United Airlines Chief Executive. Sir, good to see you. Peter Bellew from Malaysia Airlines, who's going to tell us about his restructuring. And Enrique Baltarina from Volaris.
Thank you very much.
You are most welcome as well. Right. Where should I start? Who should I start with? Which subject do you really want to hear about first? Oscar Munoz. Oscar, all right. Let's not dwell on the incident. You know, you're here amongst a group of airline CEOs. What is the lesson learned that any airline, because any airline to some extent could have fallen foul of the Dr. Dow incident. What is the lesson learned?
I think a lot of us in the room would sort of, comprehend and appreciate the fact that in our business, especially for us that have been around for a long period of time, the policies and procedures that we have in our companies are built with a foundation and a structural focus on things like safety, where there is no leeway. There is nothing that can, we don't have a lot of cushion with regards to issues of safety. So the rigor, the discipline that's associated, and appropriately so, with regards to issues of safety and to some degree efficiency, we've carried that same mantra into our customer service areas, and we've become too rigid. And I think as we look forward at United, continue to focus on the things that are important to customers. Clearly, reliability is first and foremost along safe and efficient travel. But we have to be more flexible somehow, and some of the newer airlines are able to do that, and people actually address that. So why can so-and-so do this, and why can so-and-so do that? Because they're not steeped in that 95-year tradition of rigor and discipline around safety. So we have to become more flexible and more communicative about what things.
That's very difficult to do, to become more flexible, at the same time holding the ground on integrity of safety and those standards that you can't become more flexible about, isn't it?
Sure is. And
so let's just ask, how did, and I'm not going to dwell, but as the CEO, in those early days, the statements that you made, which have been criticized since, how did those happen?
I think it's, one of the things that I advise everyone is we all have a sense of who our internal instincts about when we see something, when we feel something, when we hear something. In a crisis of that magnitude, evolving that quickly, you tend to learn and talk to too many people. Your initial instinct, your initial focus should have been, for me, with the sort of optics of that horrible event, should have been to just do what I did a few hours later, is just apologize. the facts, the circumstances, which we're all so proud to try and understand and ascertain. And so I should have been more apologetic at first, and it happened because it moved too quickly. The second part that I was criticized is for supporting my 87,000 members of my United family. And ladies and gentlemen, I will go to my grave defending that particular decision because that was the right thing to do for our company.
I think you've got 15 minutes or less to say sorry. We had an incident last Wednesday night. I was just packing my bag to come here. An aircraft took off from Melbourne heading to Kuala Lumpur. Guy had a mental breakdown on board the aircraft, a lot of roaring and shouting. Pilot called us at about 13 minutes on the sat phone, sent a message back. We think we may have an incident. And as soon as we got the call, we worked out the press statement, which included saying we were sorry. 15 minutes later, the aircraft landed on the ground. At 14 minutes, we had the first statement out. Then that got copied on social media everywhere, and that dictated the story where the story went. So I actually think you have less than 15 minutes now to say you're sorry, because people were live streaming on Facebook what was happening on the aircraft, because the aircraft was below 4,000 feet. Yeah. That's the pressure you're under now. It's horrendous.
Enrique, let's just develop that theme. 15 minutes. Does that hold true to an ultra-low-cost carrier like you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let's face it, maybe you don't care as much. I mean, maybe you haven't, not maybe the new Ryanair model, but maybe you go for the old Ryanair model. If the seat's cheap enough. Don't get started, Peter.
No, I don't think it's a matter of cost. It's a matter of, we need to understand that it's not only about answering quick and preparing it yourself for something like that, but it's also, I think, the more we move towards the low cost, we move more towards less training, more mechanization, more processing kind of passengers. And that's something that cannot happen to us. I think the most important lesson for me and for our organization from the United event was we cannot afford to be mechanized in terms of treating passengers. Passengers are people that need to be treated with respect, and we learned a lot from them, okay? Believe me, I was not prepared the day that happened to react the way I am prepared today.
How would you react today?
I would react within at least 10 minutes, A. B, I think...
Yeah, but hang on. You say you'd react within 10 minutes, Rick.
Yeah.
But you've got to get the message to you. You've got to have a system in place that gets the message from the plane/gate/ramp through the control center to that level of management, a directorate management, where somebody can say, I need to take a serious decision here.
Right. Well, I think you need to have some standard messages prepared that you use, because I agree, you have that very, very short time to react. And the first thing you can do is put out a more generic message. Then you can build on that, and you get more intelligence, and you can then start to tell your story. But you need to have some pre-prepared statements that can get out there very, very quickly. And you need to have people also responding ASAP into social media, because that's where the whole thing is going to explode.
We saw another example of it, and I don't know whether Willie is in the room. Are you in the room, Willie? If you are, maybe you will want to contribute to the discussion. We saw another example this week, or last week, with British Airways and the power supply issue.
Right.
Is Willie here?
No.
No? Yeah, I saw him earlier today, but I just wanted to make sure if he was here that he'd have a chat. Well, I'm sure he wouldn't be backward at coming forward if he was. Peter Bellew, when something like this happens, these are the crises that you have to react to within your 15 minutes. And they can get worse very quickly.
Very fast, but it's all about communications, and there's no excuse now. There's secure instant messaging systems where within an organization you can get a message around in seconds. Photographs, details, manuals, PDFs, it is actually quite easy to get the thing out. But I think saying sorry is really important, and to saying it fast. And if you don't know the answer, I think actually saying, no, we don't know when it's going to be right, works out. But you can't sit on the sidelines anymore. The speed and the proliferation of the social media will overtake you. So you have to take control of the story. And also in the case, a lot of airlines are very good now about getting senior frontline staff out on the scene very, very fast. There's nothing better than if the top people are there on the spot at the airports or at the scene of it. Again, we had an incident last year. We had unbelievably bad turbulence over the Bay of Bengal. There was a number of us were at the gate at the airport when the aircraft landed. You can stop the whole thing there and then, that minute. It doesn't go any further. But you have to have that mentality to see the customer and to say you're sorry.
Oscar, this is a very different way of responding to incidents than most of you were brought up with in terms of your various industries in the past, isn't it? This idea of the social media response, which puts an onus on the chief executive much greater than before.
Yeah, this is going to be a little controversial. I think you have more time than you think to respond to this and to respond correctly. The escalation aspect that you mentioned before, I think is critically important. Our incident at United happened on a Sunday night at 9 p.m. It didn't break in the news till 10 p.m. in Louisville, and so during the course of the evening, it had scaled up to quite some degree, and then it really began to take off, to your point. So I was well past outside of my 15 minutes. So advice I would give you, I think it's important, as Peter said, if you know the facts and you can respond immediately, do so immediately. But if you don't, and the time's already expired, then you need to take your time, because the force on me, the many different folks advising me from all different departments and areas was wide and varied, but around it was this sense of requirement, you need to do this now. And I think if I had just waited for another X amount of time, I think my initial response with my name on it would have been different.
On this question of IT, or information, or the ability of a failure of an IT system, or a power supply, whatever it is, to paralyze, Enrique, paralyze your business like nothing else.
Right?
Are you all putting enough emphasis? I mean, as CEOs, is information technology and computer support, is that a non-delegable task from your office?
It is not delegable. It is part of the risk analysis that we need to do now day to day. And it is fundamentally important to be proactive to it. Because I think we're talking about reacting. I think it's much more important to work on the proactiveness of the whole thing. And how do we prepare ourselves, and how do we eliminate the possibilities of happening, for example, a systems problem or things like that.
But Rickard, you've seen it happen to United, it happened twice to Delta, it's happened to British Airways, it's happened to Southwest. You could be next. It could be happening to you while we're talking now.
Yeah, it could, and that's the scary thing. And
well, wouldn't you like to think that it couldn't?
Well, I don't think that's not a realistic scenario, and anything can happen. And as our industry get more and more digitized, this is going to be a more and more important task. And don't forget all about this cybercrime and all these other things that goes on. I think we all need to take more and more, invest more and more time and efforts around this. But my point I'm going to make here is that you can never delegate responsibility for this, but that doesn't mean you can outsource part of your infrastructure. That's two different things.
Okay, you can outsource it to the right people, but you can't delegate responsibility if it goes wrong.
Right.
But as an industry, are you spending enough money on IT?
It's, for us, and I'm sure others, the second largest expense, capital expense, beyond the obvious of things of labor. In a lot of regards, I think I agree with Rickard. Can you absolutely say it'll never happen? I don't think anyone can say that. So the trick is to do as much as you can to mitigate and potential, but more importantly, recoverability is critical. The incident that we had a few months ago, in 2.5 hours, we were past it, and we had flights working. Some people have gone as long as 2 days and longer. And so focusing contingency, the things you control is recoverability. How do you get your crews? How do you get communications? How do you get flights and customers to their destinations? And all of it has to have a customer sort of centric aspect.
Go on.
Yeah, we were probably lucky. We were about 20 years behind on the technology until last year, and my good colleague Christoph, when he was there, he moved everything, Christoph Muller, he moved everything onto the cloud. So we have no servers.
And then he moved himself off.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. But
there.
I think
Right, Christoph.
I think there is an obsession in the airline industry with still having these massive data centers, because a lot of IT directors in airlines think it's really cool to have this domain of a hosting server center. All of the .coms that are stealing our business, none of them have server centers. They all use Amazon Web Services or something else, which actually generally costs a fraction of having these very old-fashioned data hosting centers, which you can't possibly hope to manage at the scale that you could probably get one of the really, really big IT companies to do for you.
But Enrique, again, coming back to your low-cost model, and yet your booking engine, your servers are crucial to you, aren't they?
They're absolutely crucial, but what we have done is we have moved everything to the cloud, and then we have several places in the world where we have backups, where we have placed information, etc. So as a low-cost carrier, have to rely on third party, as he's saying, okay, more and more. And then on the other side, we have to rely on recovery plans, okay? And the recovery plans is something we test every day, okay? But this is not really an issue of recovery plan or not recovery plan. I insist, you have to be proactive.
What does that mean?
It means that you have to prepare yourself for several scenarios, which is not only data-driven, which is not only airport-driven, which is an accident,
right,
which is an incident, etc.
Okay, so we're dealing with all the nitty-gritty and the bad bits. But one effect of all of this, and by the way, if there are any questions from the audience, from our guests here, we'll be taking some questions, so catch my eye at a particular point. At some point, government will come in and threaten to regulate or to do things because they perceive there's a problem. You had your bashing before Congress. Do you fear government's going to step in, Oscar?
I think we've been given a little leeway with regards to enacting some of the things that we've done at United, and a lot of people in the industry are doing across the world, self-help with regards to customers. I think incidents, unfortunately, like we had at United and a lot of other people are having, have been a great learning aspect. I think as Enrique said, I mean, it's clearly something he's learned from, and a lot of folks have done so. I think we have the control of this in our hands if we act proactively to ensure that we fix things for customers. And I think, certainly in America, we can keep, in this administration, the regulation off.
But it is going to be a task, isn't it? Because there's never shortage of politicians who will want to make political hay at your expense.
But that's a constant issue that we've always resolved. Yeah, that's not.
I think politicians in general are getting involved in a lot of things. I mean, Mexico's situation right now with the baggage, okay? When we started collecting for the first bag to the US, okay, that's a great example. I mean, they think that we are doing something against the customers and they get involved, okay? Here, what is important, more important than anything, is if we get government involved, if we get legislation involved, that they get in the right things involved. Because, for example,
but here in Mexico, you're at risk, aren't you, of the government truly interfering?
Exactly. Okay.
What would your message be to government?
In reality, what they are doing is not protecting customer rights. What they did is eliminate the customer rights because they eliminated the capacity of competing with different models.
Right.
Rickard, there's never been a regulation that the EU Commission didn't like the look of.
Right. But I think,
And I'm sure Henrik is here and will happily defend himself if necessary. But come on, he wants to regulate you at every opportunity he can.
well, I think you can't regulate yourself to good customer service. It's got to come from the businesses and the people and your passion for your business and what you want to stand for and how you want to build your brand. that's the only thing that's in long term is going to be sustainable. You can't regulate yourself or regulate an industry to good customer service. I don't believe in that.
Let's talk about security. The prospect of a wider security laptop ban, which the US is considering, well, at the moment, I mean, it seems to have been forestalled at the moment. Peter Bellew, does it make sense?
I've had a number of laptops over the years, and the number of times I've left the laptop in my bag, you know, on sleep, and you fold it and you leave it in there for 2 or 3 hours, and the heat of a lithium-ion battery when the laptop's not closed off properly, I think the risk is far greater actually putting 40 or 50 or 60 laptops in the hold and some of them aren't turned off of an accident happening. I think there is ways you can regulate it. I personally think airports in general, when I was a kid growing up in Ireland, you weren't allowed into the airport terminal unless you had a ticket. You were traveling. So airports weren't for shopping. They weren't for hanging out, you know, buying sunglasses. So some of the airports in Asia now, you can't get in the front door. So I think maybe what they're going to have to do is actually push the security right back to the front door. And if you're not a passenger traveling, you'll go. Because airlines are paying for all of this security.
This idea that there may be a genuine security risk from laptops on planes. Now, I've seen the IATA suggestions, I read Alexandra's letter, but this idea that there may be a genuine or potential risk of laptops turning into devices.
No, and that threat is probably correct and something that we need to take seriously. But the point is, and I think Alexandra did that brilliantly today in his keynote speak, trying to explain that this won't be solved if we don't collaborate, if they don't engage the industry in this issue, and that you have a right balance between security and safety, because safety always has to come first. So, you know, together, if we collaborate and we engage, I'm sure you find solutions to, you know, mitigate this potential threat.
We're moving to a situation, Oscar, where all laptops will be banned on planes, aren't we? Do you think that's the situation that we'll end up in?
You know, having had a lot of internal briefings with Department of Homeland Security about this particular threat and its viability with regards to an explosive device that has been tested in a cabin to catastrophic results is something that we have to believe the government has actually seen. And there is no detective mechanism to understand it. And so if that threat is real, everything we talk about here is important. Collaboration, working with each other, I think all of those things are critically important. But if the risk is real today, from a United Airlines perspective, we're going to comply. And again, back to mitigating as much as you can, but developing scenarios where you can be proactive and be responsive. We are putting plans together about what this would mean if indeed it was enacted, really to the EU at this particular point, but how would we service our customers in a better fashion and way. And so I got to believe the risk is real, they're telling me. How do I comply as quickly as I can?
But it is this between the devil and the deep blue sea that Peter's pointed out, between the real risk, you know, let us give the authorities the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
The authorities say that this risk is real. But we also know that the risk of 200 laptops in the hold is also real.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, Oscar, what do you prefer to do? Not have laptops at all on board the plane? I'm not asking, you know, I realize I've asked, you know, oh, when did you stop beating your wife question, but, you know.
But yet you do anyway.
What's the panel's preferred option?
At Heathrow Airport, it is a physical impossibility that you would be able to take the laptops and get them onto an aircraft. So that's one of the largest airports in the world. I've been talking to some of the operators there. So that's not going to happen. So what actually will happen is, in most cases, for most airlines, you'll be saying, don't even bring the stuff to the airport. You can't even put it in your luggage. Because the problem is if you have a lot of laptops and they're not turned off, it is a risk. There's a huge risk from devices that are still half on in luggage at 38,000 feet.
But isn't the risk the same if you have that laptop in the belly?
I think the problem is if you have 200 of them in the belly at the same time.
That's the one problem. But if you have that, if you
The explosive,
right.
as far as I've understood and been briefed, the explosive risk is not, it has to be detonated directly. It can't be remotely detonated. The risk
now.
is we understand it at this point.
For now.
For now, right.
Right, but it's this.
It's the fire in the hold is what.
Right, but it's this issue of, again, which do you prefer? You know, if presented with this impossible situation, what is your preferred solution?
I think there will be draconian measures from the airlines have to be taken
No
because
laptops.
no, don't even come near the airport with your laptop.
Well, I think the solutions that we have today doesn't help the problem. Okay, it's basically putting everything together in the belly. It doesn't solve the problem. So we really need to sit down with them and work out a solution, and we're doing that. Okay, and trying to get to a solution which makes sense.
I think we will end up the same way if you have your aftershave bottle and it's too big, they throw it in the bin at security. We will have laptops thrown in the bin. That's what it'll end up with.
It's
or
not
sent
only
back.
it's not only limited to laptops. I mean, it's extended
iPads.
to iPads. An iPad, in reality, in the back is the same thing as a phone, and they are allowing you to have a phone on board. Okay, so I think we still need to work out a solution. We are too early in the equation, and we need to keep on working.
And time is not our friend, and I think all of us will agree with the concept that if we're having this conversation next year about an aircraft, human souls being lost because we didn't do something quickly or didn't comply, and we were worried about all these little extraneous things, that's going to be a horrifically different conversation. And that's the difficult conundrum. Safety and security have to be at the topmost of our focus.
Again, I'll keep coming back to, as chief executives, how much of your time is, obviously your time is spent on operational, financial, but how much of your time is spent on these other issues like this?
Not enough, if I answer then for me personally. I don't know about the others, but these are topics that are accelerating and becoming more and more complex and more urgent. So I think they will rise on the agenda rather quickly, but I probably need to spend more time.
Oscar?
You can never spend enough time on everything we have to do, but these are evolving risks issues that we have to spend more time on.
Yeah, a lot of the talk over the last 3 days has been about this laptop issue with all the CEOs. It's been a hot topic.
We spend a lot of time on these things, okay? I mean, more and more. We spend more time on legislation. We spend more time on risk evaluation. We spend more time especially on security and safety things. But the issue is, it's never enough.
Any questions on the areas we've been talking about so far, which relate to security? They obviously relate to the issue of no? Then very quiet lot out there. Oh, wait a minute. I beg your pardon. The industry was held in low regard even before the United incident. What should industry IATA do to turn this industry around? We'll start with you.
What?
Well, it says the industry was held in low regard even before the United incident.
Right.
What should the industry do to turn the image around?
The only thing we can do is to make sure that in anything we do, we are customer-centric and we take care of our customers. We build our brand around. No, you have to do that. You can't.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm saying, but you've always been saying that for a long time.
Well, but you need to deliver then. You can't just talk about it. You need to live by it, and you need to build your brand on it. You need to build a culture in your organization. That takes time, but you need to invest in that. There's no way around that.
Yeah, I would not disagree, but phrase the question differently. I think the premise that we are held in low regard probably is not as correct as we all think. I have found that out personally. You're held in low regard by folks that fly very infrequently or have had a situation somewhere in their history that they've had a disconnect. Frequent flyers, of the thousands of emails that I receive personally, by far the most positive are our frequent flyers that understand the flying process, the difficulties therein, and what this industry goes to get those aircraft in the air. There are still people that marvel at the concept and technology of air flight, right? And we forget about that. And so how do we combat this is we lay out the facts. In America, what customers have received over the last prices are 40% less than at deregulation in the United States. Customers have choice, and 99.97% of our flights get there on time and safely. And people forget that. What customers tell you they want is all these grand things. They want more for less. And we have to give them continued choice and price options.
And I think Oscar is right. We can be better at telling these fantastic stories that we have. And some of those, that feedback that we as carriers receive from frequent customers, and tell that story, because we're doing a lot of good.
Right, but the interesting part about the airlines we have here, coming to our fundamental point of turnaround, perhaps even you've had your difficulties. Each of you, as an airline, in your own way, has had serious financial difficulties that's resulted in a major restructuring of one sort or another that's required you to reevaluate your business from top to bottom. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yes.
So in that scenario, with that, how do you deliver this higher service? Start with you, Oscar.
I didn't nod my head when everyone else nodded their head.
Sorry?
So ask somebody else the question first.
Right.
Right.
How
I have a
do
different
you...
answer.
Okay, even better, Peter Bellew. Let's talk about your problems. I mean, your airline, you had to split from old co to new co.
Yeah.
You wiped the slate clean. You started again after two awful tragedies.
Yeah.
How do you offer, as what Rickard was saying, this better customer service when you've really gone back to square one?
And you don't have the resources often to invest in the product quickly enough. It's all about people. It's all about, this is a hospitality business, and we forget that. You know, this is partly an entertainment business on board as well. If the staff on the front line have the mentality that they're there to serve the customer to the best of their ability, that they're there to use their personality, and they believe in what they're doing every day, you have some chance of giving the customer a great experience. You can actually get away with lots of problems on board an aircraft, or even delays, if the crew on board, including the captain with the announcements and the crew on board, handle situations, or the crew at gates. So it's about people, and then that comes from the very top.
But then how do you keep your own staff on board? Because let's take the Malaysian example. You fired 30% of them.
Yeah.
You cut benefits and everything for everybody else.
Yeah.
You've got an old co and a new co.
Yeah. And in our case, it's you have to make the people believe that they're following a shared goal to do something that's better as a group than it is on their own. So in our case, not only did they lost, friends, they lost colleagues who died in tragedies, and then also they lost many colleagues who lost their jobs. But at the end of the day, if a group of people like that, in our case, can come through that and come through some terrible tragedies, there's actually a backbone of steel almost in the people that makes them go on forward. And if you show them there's a shared goal that the whole organization can be successful, people can work wonders.
Let's turn to SAS.
Sure.
Let's turn to SAS, because 4 years ago, you nearly went out of business.
Yeah.
You had to restructure.
Yep.
And even today, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say this,
No.
your airline is fighting, not maybe economically, but it's fighting for its life.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, if you accept that you have no God-given right to fly, which I think you probably do, where are you positioning that airline?
Well, what we did when we had our crisis, we realized that just cutting costs won't do it. We got to do something else. So we went back and also thought through, where do we have a reason to be? Which customer group can we actually win and serve and create loyalty among? And as we had one strong asset, and that was our strong brand in our part of Europe. And we said, we can use that. And we realized that our target audience would be those who travel frequently to, from, and within Scandinavia. And we created that vision of ours, that we want to make life easier for those people who need to travel frequently to, from, and within Scandinavia. And every decision we make, and every investment, or every change that we try to drive, we hold that up against that vision and say, will this initiative actually drive us in that direction, or is it going in another direction? If it's not supporting that vision, we're going to crap it.
Right, but
But Risha, I also think it has to do with the customer proposition, okay? With the customer proposition. I mean, what are you proposing to your customers? I mean, we as a low cost, we propose them low prices for a decent level of service, okay? And I think it has to do a lot also with what we are promising the customers.
Right, but your competitor is different in the sense you have grown by dragging people off the bus, correct?
Exactly,
Your principal competitor was the bus.
exactly. I'm
His
glad
prin-
you're saying it.
His principal competitor on long haul is the Middle East 3, the Gulf 3. Short haul, it's every legacy airline that's in this room. And he's got an entire raft of low-cost carriers chomping at his bit, to say nothing of new long haul low cost.
Right.
You're only competing against the bus.
Right.
Good for him.
Until somebody else comes in and competes against you. Are you ready for that?
Yeah,
You had to think about it.
of course.
But
No, but you have to pick your fights. You can't, being a regional carrier of mid-size, we don't have the financial muscles to trying to be everything for everybody. We need to focus on this customer
can you
audience.
survive as a regional carrier of mid-size?
Time will tell. So far we're fighting back, and so far we are growing our customer base every year, and we get more and more loyal customers, and the net promoter scores are actually moving in the right direction. So yes, we believe we can, but it's a tough game, and at some point Europe will need a stronger part of consolidation. And I don't know what's going to happen, who's going to drive that, when it's going to happen, but if we get a good business proposition good and have a good franchise in order, then I think we can participate when the consolidation comes from a point of strength rather than from a point of weakness. And I'd rather be there than being somewhere else.
Yes.
No, I was going to say, an alliance partner
Right.
for us in this room, that's where we come in to assist and help in that regard. Because I think that alliance model makes a lot of sense, and it can benefit us in these, competitive, dynamic times.
Again, taking each of your airlines, Oscar, taking United, Chapter 11, then the merger, and with your arrival, and around the same time, a complete refocusing of the airline on customer service. Again, let's just put to one side the most recent events, but how difficult is it to teach that, to turn that tanker around, or to use whichever analogy, to teach that elephant to dance?
And why I hesitated, and I didn't nod my head when you first asked the question, is that I'm always careful to not provide blanket views about how things in other people should be. I would never be so insensitive enough to know. I think the process that we have to apply in business as leaders is, this is my philosophy, and you can do it however what you want. You have to listen first, learn from that listening, go back to listening. So listen, learn, and then lead. So I completely agree with Peter's aspect of people and the concept around that. And without that pride and professionalism and values, it's not policies and procedures, it's human values that create customer service. But you have to know that that's the problem. And if that isn't the problem initially, going to fix people things don't make sense. In our particular case, it was absolutely people. But I took my time to listen and learn what that meant and specifically what it is that we had to fix. And so with regards to how difficult it is to turn something around, in a turnaround situation, it's not finding what it is you need to do. What is it that you need to focus on first, right? How you prioritize, because you cannot do everything at once. So in our particular case, was regaining the trust of our employees and then working forward from there.
And then, in order to do what Oscar is saying, I think you also need to find a way that your middle managers can take their communicative leadership and actually stand there facing the employees, singing the same story, explaining why you need to do these changes, and not just point upwards and say, the boss decided, or the CEO decided, or the board decided. That doesn't work. You need to train your leaders to really, face their employees and engage the employees and give them the true story. Otherwise, you can't transform an organization.
Do you think, we turn up at an IATA meeting and we talk about new routes, or we talk about new products, or new beds, or whatever it might be, regulation. Do you think that we fully understand, that the non-CEOs in this room fully understand that actually the secret of the turnaround is your ability to energize the staff? Peter?
No, I don't think people understand that. And I think actually it's very hard to keep that in your own mind. You have
Because
to be focused on
I tell you, I just wanted to, because whenever I interview any of you in this room, and you always say this, or the CEOs always say, my eyes glaze over, and I think, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? He's just being nice about, he's trying to sound good.
And but you have to get down to the ground to where the people are. You have to, because if you don't do that, you're not going to get through to people. But people can sniff out BS staff at a moment's notice. They generally know everything you're doing through tracking people through social media and instant messaging. So if there's something going on in a company, they will know before you will do. So you have to get right down. You have to listen to people right on the ground.
Yeah. Enrique.
I think it's exactly the same way in a low-cost carrier, okay? I mean, we need to talk to the people. We need to provide them leadership. We need to provide them values. We need to provide them systems. We need to provide them procedures and everything. It's not just because we are an ultra-low-cost carrier that we don't have that. And the leadership piece of the CEO, it's important. But I think it's also important to understand, Richard, that more and more and more, the CEOs do not know everything in life, okay? I mean, that has dramatically changed, okay?
They just pretend to know everything.
We just pretend it.
You get paid to know everything. Let me ask you on this question then. We'll move on to another area, but this question, I suspect I'm not going to get much of an answer from any of you on this. How proactive are you with your own home country intelligence and security agencies in encouraging the collaboration that the industry seeks? Peter Bello.
As much as they can.
We do have interaction, and where I worked before in Ryanair, we had very close interaction actually with the authorities, because there was a significant problem with people trafficking across Europe, and we did work with them very closely on that. And it is very, very important, because often the threat is the insider threat, because it's very easy for people in the airline business to be up to very, very terrible things because they have access to airside.
You were saying you have regular briefings, obviously, with DHS and at senior levels. Oscar?
We're not allowed to talk about these interactions.
Oh, well, there we are.
And if I were to be in a room where I was allowed to preach the concept of working together and collaborating and sharing information between any agency anywhere, if there's no better proof than 9/11 and what happened to America then, I think hopefully we've learned that lesson in America and continue to ensure that our intelligence agencies are working closely not only with each other, but the threats that we see sometimes out in the marketplace.
Let's show the address where people can raise questions if they have any. We'll show the address. And again, if anyone's got a question they want to put directly to, just put their hands up. I want to ask about product now, because if we're looking at the product and how you're all changing. Start with you, Ricardo. Now,
sure.
The big new kid on the block, arguably, is medium or long haul low cost. Mm-hmm. Level started last week. I assume, Norwegian, we can argue about its profitability and its debt levels, but it continues.
They're growing like crazy. Yeah,
it's growing like crazy. Mm-hmm. AirAsia X is going to grow even further and faster. How are you going to respond? You can't afford your own.
No, I think we need to, again, go back to our purpose and the customer group that we're trying to target. And we say that, okay, we can operate effectively from our geographical position in the northern hemisphere, i.e. to North America and to Northeast Asia. We do that. We'll pick the destinations where we know we have a lot of direct demand to, from, and within Scandinavia. We offer a daily service, and we also offer a product where you have where you actually compete with the low-cost carriers in the economy product, but you also have a premium product. And we ignore flying to destinations where we can't get a good mix of both business and leisure travel, because then we can't win. But when we get that mix in the right geography, we can win, and we've proven that we can win, and we're going to continue to focus there.
But you agree that these medium haul, long-haul low costs are going to grow.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. The long-haul market is, I think, it's going to go through some significant change. The same as we saw in Europe for short-haul is now coming to long-haul.
But I don't think it's that new. If you take in Europe, Aer Lingus has been doing low-cost long-haul for about 10 years. It's just perception is reality. They have the low costs of the low-cost airline on the A330 fleet that they have, but they have 27 seats up front that are always booked out in business class, and they get a good yield. So it's a matter of perception is reality for the customer, and if you get the costs right, you can make it work. Continental have been doing it for 20 years with the 757s. They reconfigured that leave the East Coast and head over to Bristol and Dusseldorf and these places. I think they're phasing them out now. So it's been around a long time. It's not a new thing.
Well, you say that. A version of the model has been around, or at least the earlier iteration has been around. But when you get Level and you get Norwegian coming in on a much greater scale, what are you going to respond with?
But I think you come back to
Air Asia X,
Yes,
which
so-
starts to compete against directly on your routes.
Yeah, and I think you have to take a view. You have to get your costs. All airlines have to get their costs severely under control. They have to get their costs down close to all the other carriers, and you have to do whatever you have to do to make that happen. But there are people who still pay for business class tickets.
Well, I think that's the way we were born. I mean, we compete based on cost and being the lowest cost operator and control costs and manage costs down, okay? But clearly, I'm not yet convinced that the low-cost model works on a long haul. And that's
Really?
the economics. I mean, I run the economics and I cannot find the economics there, okay? So, I mean, my position is I would not do it.
You wouldn't.
No.
What's your maximum range that you'll go?
A321s with 234 passengers.
Oscar, how are you going to compete when slowly but surely, route by route, somebody is going to pick off passengers?
Well, you don't make it easy for them. And I think part of the turnaround story at United is that we have allowed many to take advantage of our docile nature with regards to the revenue side of the equation. I agree with cost, and always, as leaders, we have to manage that.
Yeah.
But the global footprint that United is, the promise of that unsolvable puzzle of how to make that work from a revenue perspective has not been solved. I've got the team to do it, and we've already started. Domestic catchment and connection areas, we're starting to get more the right frequency with the right aircraft for the right missions across the global aspect. For me, for us, it's more of a revenue play along with the cost play.
And that also goes to your new strategy that Scott's introducing in terms of your domestic.
That's the catchment area and connectivity. We as a legacy carrier with all the footprint and areas that we have an ability to do a lot more. Connecting traffic is an incredible, valuable commodity in our space. Low-cost carriers don't have that. And so how do we play both against each other to ensure, again, competition is here to stay. Anything that's on a level playing field, we will compete with it as decisively as we need to. But we also have to offer the customer choice because customers do want low costs and low fares. So we offer that through basic economy. They also want that high end of the cabin, and we offer Polaris. And so it's that whole journey across the middle that has to be worked through.
And then I think we need, as you pointed out before, we need to collaborate more within our alliances and with our partners as well, because the most scarce resource that our customers, most of our frequent customer has today is time.
The alliances are dead.
Well,
That's
they
not my
might-
view.
All right.
That's not my view, by the way.
Well, we can argue about that. It will
you,
be.
you disagree, Carson? Sorry?
It's not dead, and it's going to transform. Yes, it's not. Cannot stand still. Nothing can stand still. It will evolve and it will transform.
We've
But it
stopped
still has
pushing
a
at
lot-
the edges
right.
of that.
Yeah.
We just got accustomed to just doing what we normally do.
But
No,
if we
we have
get-
leaders in place in all the places that I align with that I think see in the world in the right way, which is moving forward in growth.
And if we together can find a way to don't waste our customers' time and make travel more efficient and more seamless, then we have a proposition.
Yeah, I did my IATA fares and ticketing exams 32 years ago, right? And it was much, much easier to book through tickets with all the airlines 30 years ago than it is today. We have made it as an industry incredibly difficult for people to buy things from us. And part of the attraction of the low-cost carriers, I think, is the proposition is very simple. And the time they can get through the website is. I tried to book a couple of tickets myself this morning, and it was torture. One on a mainline American.
Don't you know a CEO or two that could actually help you?
And
I can put you in touch with the right one if you tell me where you're wanting to go.
And the problem with the consumer is they're so used to, as I am, with making a transaction with Amazon that's done in 90 seconds, and the customer service is perfect. And to be honest, a lot of our customer service and our web presence is appallingly bad.
See, I think, and again, obviously biased, I think United.com has gone from 0 to billions, and our complaints that come in are rarely from that space. Now, we always need to be more flexible, but if you know what you want, you know where you want it, you can book that flight in nanoseconds. And again, we're never going to be as nimble. We're not going to be in the cloud yet, and we're always going to have difficulty because of the massive scope and scale that we have as a global airline. But I think it's more useful and useful.
And I also think the cooperation was better in the past between the airlines. I think people have lost a little bit of that sense of
What
cooperation.
do you mean by now? When you say cooperation?
You know, if a member was in trouble 20, 30 years ago, everybody else, without being asked, would have rallied around. Sometimes there isn't quite the sense of that there. So,
as we come towards the end, let me just ask though, what for you is the role of the alliance? What do you see as the role of the alliance? I mean, you know, whether the alliance is one of those wonderful discussions that we'll be talking about IATA for the next 10 years, I suspect. But what for you is the essential role of STAR?
Well, no single carrier can connect every single dot on the globe, and you need partners. And you need to find a way to make your customers move in that broad network in a very efficient and seamless way. I think that's the whole idea. That's the basic idea. And we need to use technology to evolve that and to make it even, you know, a further more compelling proposition than we have today.
I think, Richard, in our case in Mexico, the fact is we only had connecting airlines, okay? And we only had hub and spoke models, okay? So we are kind of behind of the world in terms of point to point, okay? And when in the US, for example, Southwest in the years of the 70s developed the point to point model, I mean, we today have 27% of our available seat miles, we are unique in the market, operating those markets, okay? So fundamentally, the way I see it is we need to preserve our point-to-point model, okay? And if someone wants to connect, if someone needs to connect, it's the legacy carrier's job to do it. It's not our job.
Hang on, you're going against a trend here, because if you look at, say, Level/Vueling, if you look at what Ryanair is experimenting with, if you look at what EasyJet in Europe's experimenting with, and indeed JetBlue, they're all fiddling with the model to get what Oscar's talking about.
In a mature phase, yes.
Sorry?
In a mature phase, yes. But in our phase where we have a country that didn't have in reality a point-to-point system, we are far behind that, far behind that. I mean, eventually when my model is mature, I will start seeking for connectivity. But today, it is as simple as that. We need to have a point-to-point model to operate within our regions, okay? I mean, when you look at Central America, for example, I mean, everything they have is connectivity, okay? And everything they have is hub and spoke. And those models are not developing a lot of markets that need point-to-point connectivity.
What do you want from the alliance?
If you work the alliances properly, it can give you another, on a flight, 1 or 2% of revenue, but sometimes that revenue is incredibly valuable, and the average yield on it is a multiple of what you get from somewhere else. So we're getting much better at doing it ourselves, and we're seeing good payback. Again, I'd say they're regenerating themselves, and I see that happening in One World at the moment. There's a lot of work taking place that hadn't been, but there's some very, very valuable incremental revenue on flights that can actually make up for a lot of cheap tickets that you're probably selling out in the back of the plane.
As we come to the end, oil might or might not tick up a bit more, another 10, 15%, we don't know. We saw today what's happening between Qatar and the other Gulf states and the other half a dozen countries. It is a reminder to each of you that you really don't know where the next throttle is going to come from to your business. So I ask you this. Has the airline industry learned the lessons of previous crises such that you are ready, fitter and fairer for the next one?
I think so. I think at least we all understand that we need to prepare for winter. And you need to have a margin that could sustain some issues. So it's one thing to understand you need to do it, but actually execute it on it is the problem and the challenge, at least for us. So I don't doubt that people understand and the industry knows what they need to do, but it's hard work to make it happen. And that's what's ahead of us.
Enrique.
I don't think, I mean, in a scenario where fuel duplicates the value, I think the industry in general would adjust itself, okay? And I don't think anyone can be really prepared for going back to $100 barrel oil.
I think we're going to catch a break on fuel, actually. I think the renewable energy is at an inflection point where probably 2019-20, it will be starting to become very, very significant for global energy needs. And I think we could head in 2020, 21 for 10 years of $30 a barrel, because the renewable energies is going to be so massively growing, and the battery technology. So I think we could be into the next decade a real golden age for the aviation industry.
Right, but you don't want your future profitability to be totally predicated on a lower oil price.
No, but I think it gives you enormous opportunity, because the other balancing part of the renewables will create other global wealth around it as well.
Oscar, are you ready for the next downturn, the next crisis?
Well, you know, we don't know where it's coming from, certainly. I think we potentially somewhat over-obsess on the history of the airline space. Now, says a newbie, I understand everybody's like, he doesn't remember or not understand the history. I do, I remember it, I understand it. I lived through it as a board member. I think part of the hindrance to growth, to revenue management, to expansion, to creating better customer service is that we're always so worried about that next crisis that we don't make the right and proper investments. That's where alliances can help, because we can do that together. That's where sort of a forward-looking view as opposed to obsessing. Now, of course, you always have to have contingency plans. You always have to worry. I mean, at United, we have a very large sort of cash balance, and we modulate, we know what it is, we know how much we withstand, and then we got to tell our company, our capital expenditure folks, that you got to invest for the longer term. We've gone so much from feast to famine to feast to famine that's compelled us to be so near term in our thinking. I think we need to expand that a little bit more. And that's a newbie coming, I understand.
How do you do that?
We've already begun to do it.
I mean, how do you take an industry, you've summed it up perfectly, that's gone feast to famine? It's either the depths of winter or it's the beauty of summer in this industry. How do you change that mentality, Peter?
You can't, and that's the fun of it. That's why we all love it so much, because it's completely crazy and it's nuts.
And on that note, our panel, thank you.